impacts on the way we measure poverty. Directly in the methodology, we had these two approaches because of basically the law is telling us you have to use these two approaches. Social rights is a very important one. It's in the Constitution. And we have to link poverty with social deprivation and social rights. And also we have to keep using the old way of measuring poverty, which is the economic well-being approach. So we are combining both of them. So this is the type of presentation we are actually presenting in many institutions in Mexico. So we are trying to make it understandable, as James was saying, and very easy to understand because they want these guys to use it. So you will see exactly the same version we are using at this very moment to go to many institutions and many ministries, even the president as well, and Congress people. So we want to put in that square, we want to map there all the population in Mexico, and we want therefore to classify people according to the different dimensions the law are asking us. So we are, as we will see later, we'll put the well-being part on that vertical axis, and we're going to put 6 other deprivations on the social sphere, social rights there, educational gap, access to health, access to social security, housing, basic services, and access to food. They will be there. I'll be more specific later on. Keep me there for 1 second. So we're going to map all people there. And for the 8th dimension, which has been the most difficult one for us, which is social cohesion, the degree of social cohesion which Congress people put there. Somehow, the story. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, the main question we asked was, what do you mean by that? No? And how do you measure that? How do you measure that? But then, of course, we had these discussions with some of the Congress people. The story about social cohesion is kind of funny because there were a couple of congressmen who wanted to put this inside, and they said, we won't sign the law if you don't put all this here, so it is the consensus then. So it was then. Therefore, because it's difficult to understand somehow, at least for some of us, it's difficult to measure, we thought it was better to take it off the main indicator and measure that somehow in a territorial way. So we are using, as you will see, as if I have time to do it, we're using certain indicators for that, but only for the territorial part, within municipalities, within the states, and of course for the whole country. So let me put more specific. So the main features, as I said, we want been to do it simple to understand. So let me go to the horizontal axis first. So here we're going to divide people between those without any deprivations in the social sphere, in the social rights. If I have time, I'll go to cutoffs later on. And then those who have at least one social deprivation. It doesn't matter what type of deprivation is that, because as we said before, let me see if it works properly. These are the principles of human rights. I'm going to talk about some of them. They are universal. Everybody is entitled to them. Everybody's entitled to them, are entitled to them. Indivisible. All rights have equal status and cannot be positioned in a hierarchical order within those social rights. And they are interdependent. Unfulfillment of any rights affect the others in the sense that you don't have full access of social rights in general. Therefore, these first cutoff, let's say, between those who have access according to what the law says and those who had at least one. Of course, it is important for public policy purposes what type of deprivations are there, but we'll go that later on. So this is the first important cutoff for us. And then we have the usual, let's say, cutoff for well-being. We call it economic well-being line, poverty line. This is the usual poverty line, which includes food and other necessities. We'll come later on that. And we have a distinction, as always, as those who have enough income and those who doesn't have enough income. And therefore, with these two very simple to understand cutoffs, we have the following charts. We do have the following thing. First of all, what we wanted to have from the law is this type of cutoff. We are, well, I don't know if you see that, but you have this what we call multidimensional pool, those who have at least one deprivation from the social arena, and those who are below the income level. We think that from the public policy point of view, those are our priority. However, we said at the beginning we want to map all people there specifically because social rights are universal. Therefore, we have three other spaces. One space, what we call vulnerable people by social deprivation, using the term of vulnerable in a very broad sense. But these are guys with, let's say, enough income, but who are within the service deprived of at least one deprivation. An interesting story coming from real data is a guy who earns, let's say, $4,000 a month in Mexico. It is difficult to call him poor. However, he doesn't have access to health or to social security. So in any eventuality of an accident or an illness, which has happened to you and me suddenly, it has a problem of suffering from that illness and then having to pay for that because he doesn't have fully access to that right. Therefore, we are cutting that vulnerable. Some of them may fall here, of course. Some of them may fall down here, but nevertheless, even those guys there may suffer some type of vulnerability because of the lack of access to social rights. And these are the guys, as David Gordon put it, these guys have all their access, all their social rights access, but for that time, they don't have enough income for that very moment. It happens a lot. It happened a lot in the crisis recently that many people suffered from income reduction. Nevertheless, they were all with all their access. David Golden says, well, if that person may have a reduction of income for a long time, it may enter poverty in the near future. So we have to monitor those people. We don't want to call them poor in this diagram, in this method, but let's have a monitor of them. So the interesting part for us is that all this mapping is important, and of course we have the fourth one. The fourth one is all the people, all the population without deprivations and with adequate levels of economic well-being, and therefore the objective for public policy is moving Mexicans from this end to this end. Of course, some of them may pass here or may pass there, but perhaps a priority for Mexican public policy is poor people, but we cannot stop there. Social rights are universal, and therefore we have to keep an eye, a very important eye there in those people up there. And it is funny because, or it's interesting because at this moment we are celebrating the 200 years of independence and 100 years of revolution. So what we keep saying is that hopefully in the next 100 years, we'll find more Mexicans in this green space than we have here. Hopefully we have less people here and hopefully less people there. Priority here, but our main goal will be putting Mexicans over here. That's I have to tell you, this type of way of putting it makes a lot of sense to policymakers. Even if you go to Congress, even if you go to the executive, it does make sense. At least they say, oh yes, it's interesting. Let's go to aggregation issues. James and Sabina talked about that. That's the work of Sabina and James was very important to this part. As you know, how can we measure poverty? Well, the usual one is headcount ratio. We count the number of people here, and then we divide it by the whole people here, and we count the people here and divide it to the rest. That's important. People understand this headcount ratio, but it's not enough. It's not enough, especially if we have many dimensions there. So, individual level. we start with individual level. Of course, many of the dimensions are shared by individuals. But for instance, educational gap is an individual level problem. Social access to social health is individual in general. Sometimes access to social security is individual. However, income is not. Income is not. Income is not.
So you assume that if you have adequate income, everybody.
That's right. That's right. We cannot distinguish that. Difficult to do that. So we have the headcount ratio in terms of population, not households. We are doing that. If we have time, I'll tell you now. But also, it is sensible to think of another way of aggregating, and therefore it's different, as James was saying, a person who's poor here, who has 1 deprivation, and a person who's here who's got 5 deprivations within that square, or in here. So we are also using and selling that to the people, that the average number of deprivations, to make it easier, is very important as an aggregation number. James and Sabina way of putting it it says we have the average number of deprivations respective the total deprivation number we have. But that's a bit too much for Congress people. So even if we produce this, the numbers, what we have different ways of calling that, M0 and A, we do produce them. It is easier to think about age and number of deprivations. And the good thing about that is that you can see somehow the full range of changes in public policy, because especially in this year of crisis, as you will imagine, income poverty has been up because of Mexicans? No, because of someone else. Huh? And however, if we have headcount ratio, when we will release headcount ratio next year, there is almost no doubt that it will go up. However, I'm also sure that this average number of deprivation, will go down, and policymakers are happy looking at that, either if they increase or if they decrease. So that's also very important way of putting it. We have therefore an aggregation measurement of headcount and of number of deprivations, and we go later on about that.
When you refer to the quadrants, mention which one it is for the people in the field that are not seeing your.
Yeah, well, what we call the green is nirvana, let's say. The orange one is poverty, and the white ones are what we call vulnerable by social deprivations or vulnerable by income. Numbers for the year 2008, we have, out of 106 million Mexicans, we have these numbers. We have 44% of people in poverty, those millions, 2.7 deprivations on average for those people. We move up vulnerable people by deprivations, 33%, important, 2.2 deprivations on average, 4.5% here, of course, no deprivations by, and we have only 18.3 people in this green area. Of course, press sometimes get different perspectives, or they use numbers differently. I say, well, poverty is all this, all this white, orange, and white is poverty. It is not. Is not exactly that from our point of view. However, they are right saying that those guys have a problem, somehow a problem, a minor one or a huge one. But we have to monitor all those. And again, hopefully, in the next 100 years, we'll have more people in these more than 18.3% of people up there on that green one. And then we can, for the first time in this, for this survey, we can identify indigenous people for the first time. So for instance, we can do that. These are the whole country, and this is non-indigenous people. Indigenous people, as you will see, the orange percentage is huge within indigenous people than without not being indigenous. the white one, only 3.1